All right, so this is going to be a review of Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, the fourth Indiana Jones movie. For years, it was known to be the worst Indiana Jones movie, completely forced. It was fine after Last Crusade, but they forced it anyway. And now we have a new one, once again, with Harrison Ford being 80 years old now. They still forced another one. But whatever. I saw, or I've seen the new one, and I didn't like it. And I also don't like this one. So there's a question between, amongst people who don't like the new one of which one is worse. And I'll say which one I think is worse later on. But anyway, it's directed by Steven Spielberg, just like the earlier ones were. And you can definitely tell, with the newer one, it's James Mangold, and there's definitely a difference there. But it starts off with some Russians attacking a military warehouse. It's Nevada in 1957, I believe. And they're trying to find something in that warehouse, but they can't find it. So they captured Indiana Jones, once again played by Harrison Ford, and Mac, played by Ray Winstone. And they capture them so that Indy can help them find it because he was part of a team some time ago that examined it or something like that. So they bring him in there. Indy finds it for them because it's magnetic. He uses their bullets, and then he goes to make like a daring escape, but he gets stopped because Mac turns out to be a double agent. I don't care for the double agent storyline in this. I think it's redundant. I think it's unnecessary, but it's there. Indy actually does end up escaping though, and then ends up in this nuke town type area. They're apparently testing a nuke right then, I guess, conveniently, and he's able to survive a nuke by getting into a fridge, radiation and all. It's really stupid. But he gets back, he gets questioned by some suits because, it's kind of some Red Scare stuff in this where, you got people chanting better dead than red and stuff. So they start suspecting him of working with the Russians and being a Red himself. So he ends up getting fired from the university, and so he's going to leave. But then he gets stopped by Shia LaBeouf's character in this, Mutt Williams. He had a archaeologist friend that Indy knows, Oxley, that went crazy as a result of the Crystal Skull in this movie, and he was trying to bring it back to the City of Gold because that's the legend. You bring back the skull to the City of Gold or the Lost City, and you're given some kind of power. So that's what the Russians are after. The Russians, I didn't even say, led by Irina Spalko. That's Kate Blanchett. So Mutt comes to Indy. Indy starts looking through these letters and things because Mutt's mother, Mary Williams, who turns out to be Marion Ravenwood, was actually kidnapped by the Russians too. They took Oxley and her so that Mutt would go to Indy and so they would find the skull for them. So they end up in Peru. They go to the grave of some conquistadors. Oriana, I think, was the lead there. The lead conquistador that went there, and they were never seen again after they went to the city to find it. And so they find the skull there because Oxley put it back there because he wasn't actually able to, I guess, get into the temple in that city. So they find it, and then they get taken by the Russians. And Marion and Indy have a reunion, which is kind of nice. And then they try to escape, fail, but then they escape later on. And then there's ants and fake CGI monkeys and all kinds of other stuff. But they end up getting to the city and getting in the temple. And then the Russians catch up with them again. Spalko gives the skull to one of the things. They're in this room with a bunch of the different skeletons, and they all have the same skull of the skull that they have, and they turn out to all be a hive mind. They come together to become some alien thing. It's really jumping the shark for Indiana Jones, and Spalko gets hers just like the other villains in the old movies from the alien. They get away, and then there's kind of a nice ending with Indy and Marion getting married. And it seems like that could be, a bad movie, but it's a decent ending still by the very end for Indiana Jones to end all this. But like I said, there's a new movie out right now. So positives. Harrison Ford, still really good in the role. Even though he's too old, and we'll talk about that a little bit more, which has always been a thing for me with this movie and also with the new one. I still think that gives a really good performance, and he still captures this character. You can tell he does care about this character, unlike Han Solo. He's really invested, and he does great. He has some really good moments with Marion that are touching, and even with Mutt. I know a lot of people don't like Mutt. I think Mutt's pretty good. The performances, for the most part, are all pretty good, other than probably Kate Blanchett because she has that unfortunate accent.
Where is it you would imagine I am from, Dr. Jones?
Well, the way you're sinking your teeth into those W's, I should think maybe Eastern Ukraine.
Highest marks.
Other than that, I think the performances are all good, even if the writing isn't of the overall story isn't great. Also, the action. I think the action's done well. There's the scene in the diner and things like that. It still has that Spielberg style where it still has that fun kind of pulpy nature like the original movies did. So I think the main thing that keeps this from being completely unwatchable is Spielberg, pretty much. So there is some good action scenes in here throughout. And I actually really liked Indy and Mutt's relationship in this. I know people don't like Mutt. I did like their relationship in this. Mutt's a little too much at times. Like they try too hard to make him, street tough or whatever. He's dipping his comb in somebody's drink so that he can comb his hair and then stealing a beer from the waitress when she's bringing it to the table. There's things like that. He gets in Indy's face when he says he knows a lot of Marys or whatever. And it's like, why are you getting in his face? Like you would think that he called his mom a whore or something like that. Like it's too much. But after that initial antagonism that they had, I do like their dynamic. They're very different, but they do bond. And when they do certain things, especially after they find out that they're father and son from Marion, there are some good interactions with them. Like there's moments with them kind of admiring each other and things like that. I think their dynamic does work.
You're a teacher?
Part-time.
That's all the positives I have. The one thing that's always been a problem for me with this movie, even when I first saw it, Indy is just too old, and I don't like seeing this pulpy hero, this fun adventure. I don't like seeing him old. I just don't like it. I don't like it. It kind of goes against what's fun about the character in a way, because whenever he's doing these things, making these daring escapes and things like that, it doesn't really feel all that believable. Like he's in action scenes and he's doing well in a way that doesn't feel all that realistic. Like even for this kind of movie, it still is a lot for you to go with him getting in certain fights and things like that. When they're doing this big thing in the jungle, he jumps into a truck full of guys and he's punching them out. There's the earlier part where he's swinging with the whip and doing all these other things when he's escaping from the warehouse. And then when he fights that big dude, like that big dude, he looks like he would potentially give him problems even when he in his prime, even when he was young. But he's just wailing on this guy. And yeah, you have the sound effects and stuff, which I still like. But that's not enough for me to believe that he's really, because he's laying into this dude right before the guy falls into that that army of ants and they take him away into their anthill. Like it's too much. It's too much to go with. He's always just wait. He's in good shape for his age, but he's just too old for this shit.
For an old man, you ain't bad in a fight.
Thanks a lot.
What are you, like 80?
The story of this movie, it seems like it would work, right? Because even though Aliens is jumping the shark for Indy, it is, but and it doesn't fit. But the idea that you're bringing this, this alien, this ancient alien head or whatever, to a city of gold before the Russians do and get some kind of power or whatever, like it seems like it could fit with Indy other than the alien stuff, obviously, right? And so it's an interesting action adventure plot that you could go on, but it's just so bogged down with exposition early on. Even the earlier parts, which I think are the best parts of the movie, it's just the exposition was making it kind of dull in places. Where I was like, man, it's just you and Mutt just explaining things about Oriana or the Conquistadors or whatever. And it feels like you could simplify that and kind of cut it down a little bit because there's so much exposition, it actually makes it more confusing as it does usually in movies. But then it gets to a certain point of stupidity and they're adding more things onto what I was already trying to grasp from the story and everything that happened in the past with the skull and things like that it just gets dumb. Like the point where it starts to completely, lose me is when they strap Harrison Ford, Indiana Jones, to a chair and they make him stare into the skull's eyes and it'll awaken a part of his brain. It's like, why even introduce that into this, right? It explains why Oxley has gone mad. And then it's also the reason why Indy feels like he needs to bring the skull back is because it told him to. That's what he says later on. Other than that, there's no real need for it. And it's not really explained at all. Like they have these giant ants or whatever later on that are just surrounding them, even though they're in an open space and they could just keep running. But for whatever reason, they're on top of like trees and things. I guess it's easier to escape from them if you can see them. Maybe that was the idea, but because you may not be able to see them in all the grass and stuff if they kept running. But whatever, it doesn't matter. Apparently, the skull, I guess its eyes or whatever, can part the ants in that scene, and I have no idea why. Like, why does it affect the ants? Is it awakening a part of their brain too? It's just it's really unnecessary and kind of dumb. I get why it would make the villagers that live in that city or whatever. I get why it would make them not attack them because they worship those alien deities and the skull and all that. But for the ants, I was like, okay, that feels forced. Like the skull can just do whatever you need at that time. Then you have the chase and all that, where what's it called, Spalco, Kate Blanchett, and Shia LaBeouf Mutt, they're fencing with each other or whatever on top of those trucks, which is kind of cool, it's kind of exciting, but it's still a little too ridiculous with everything else going on. Then he gets caught on that tree, and everybody knows this, right? Everybody always goes back to this, where he sees a monkey, which is at least looks like a real monkey to me. And then right after that, he's swinging through through the trees and everything, on the vines, like he's Tarzan. And then you have those monkeys there. We just saw a real monkey, or at least looked like one to me. And then you have these fake, just really fake monkeys. The CGI animals look so bad. The gophers, I guess they were gophers in the beginning in Nevada, that looked really bad. It's like, no, just keep the CGI animals out of this, and we don't need swinging through the tree Shia LaBeouf. I think we're fine on that. And then by the time they get to the aliens, like I said, it feels like a jump in the shark thing, and it just feels like too much. Like it feels like something that big would have more consequence. Like they've seen aliens, they have proof of aliens in the 50s right now, and it doesn't really feel like it's gonna have much of a meaning or consequence. Are they even gonna tell anybody? It's too much. And I remembered, I thought that Spalco's head exploded from all the knowledge, which is already kind of dumb. But she seems like she just kind of disintegrated. It's like, why are they the alien? They come together, become one alien. Why is he sucking them up into his UFO? Why is he leaving now? Is there a reason for that? Were they always planning to leave, but they didn't have the final skulls? This is what I'm talking about when it's like they're adding more details to the story that actually make less sense or make it more confusing. By the end of it, it's like, okay, the villain got their comeuppance, which happens in the other movies, but she didn't leave much of an impression, and it kind of feels like it just happens. Like they go through all the different traps and things, go down some stairs and things to get to that main area with the aliens. His friend Mac is still doing double agent, like he's a triple agent, he's a double agent of the CIA. It's lame, and then he ends up dying, and I'm supposed to feel something I didn't. But yeah, the ending is just, it's too much. I will say there's one good thing about it, is that when the aliens leave, and the whole temple turns into their UFO, and they have all the rocks there, and then they disappear. I actually liked that. That was a good looking shot. Like of all the effects in this movie, that was the best looking thing. But which one do I think is worse, this movie or Dial of Destiny? I think Dial of Destiny is worse. Even in the dull moments in this movie, there aren't that many early on and things like that with some of the exposition. With the new movie, it's pretty much dull almost the entire movie long. Right? Like you got the beginning part with the deep fake stuff, that's kind of lame to me, but it does kind of feel like Last Crusade, but it's very distracting with the deep fake stuff. And then the middle of the movie is just them going to a place, getting found by Mads Mikkelsen, going to another place, getting found, and you're not invested in what he's trying to do. You barely know what it really is. And the MacGuffin itself, the Dial of Destiny, you don't really care. So yeah, for me, that, yeah. And then when it gets to the third act, it's just as jumping the shark and ridiculous as the alien stuff in this movie, but the alien stuff in this movie is more set up, I think, whereas all the craziness going on in Dial of Destiny doesn't feel like it has that much setup at all. Like it really is just Mads Mikkelsen saying what's about to happen right before it does. So yeah, for me, the newest one was very boring, very unnecessary. The ending of this movie with the wedding and all that, it's a perfectly fine end. It's not as good as ending with Last Crusade, but it's perfectly fine. Whereas that newest movie just feels completely unnecessary, and your star is 80 years old. We still got it anyway. So I'm going to give this trash just like I gave Dial of Destiny, but just know, this is not as bad as Dial of Destiny to me. For me, it's Raiders, Last Crusade, Temple of Doom, Crystal Skull, Dial of Destiny. But anyway, that's it. That's Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Subscribe, and we're done.